إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. So this is normally the Thursday lesson. We moved it to Saturday due to the hardship that people are having when they're fasting and then to stay after Maghrib for a lesson. So this is the Aqidah lesson from Thursday. And inshallah there's only about 2 or 3 left. So after tonight there'll be 1 or 2 left after that. So what's left from this book that we're going through is the 3rd and 4th parts. The 3rd part of this book is the author mentioning the evidences that the mushrikeen use to try to prove their shirk, or to try to prove that the shirk that they perform is permissible. So he says, the people who commit shirk in our times employ another argument similar to the one that has gone before, which they use to refute their opponents. So here when he says the opponents, this is talking about Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, or the Muslimin in general. So it's talking about when the Muslimin try to prevent shirk, the kuffar or the mushrikeen try to use these evidences to say that it's allowed, or that calling them non-Muslims isn't allowed. So he says that they say that the Prophet ﷺ reprimanded Usama ibn Zayd when he killed the person who said La ilaha illallah, and he told him أَقَتَلْتَهُ بَعْدَ أَنْ قَالَ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, or that the Prophet ﷺ said, did you kill him after he said La ilaha illallah? And then the author says, and they've also used the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, أُمِرْتُ أَنْ أُقَاتِلَ النَّاسِ حَتَّى يَشْهَدُوا أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, or that I was commanded to fight the people until they say La ilaha illallah. And then he says, and similar hadith that prohibit harming someone who says La ilaha illallah. And then he says, or he continues and he says that the point is that these ignorant people, they try to prove with all of these ahadith that someone cannot be a disbeliever or can't leave Islam as long, or that they can't be killed no matter what they do. So he says it should be said to these ignorant people who commit shirk, it is well known that the Prophet ﷺ fought the Yahud, or fought the Jews, and he took them as captives, even though they say La ilaha illallah. And also the companions fought Banu Hanifa, and we talked about Banu Hanifa before. They're the ones who fought alongside Musaylama al-Kadhab. And they would say La ilaha illallah, but despite this the Sahaba radiallahu anhum considered them to be disbelievers and fought them as such. And then he continues and says, also the companions fought the tribe of Banu Hanifa, even though they testified to La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, and they used to pray and they claimed to be Muslims. Likewise, the people whom Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu burnt used to testify to the same matter. And this is going back to we talked about a few weeks ago when Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, the Rafidah came up to him, or the beginning of the Rafidah came to him, and they said, you are him, so meaning you are Allah. So he commanded for a ditch to be dug, and he lit the fire in it, and then he burnt them all, and that was his punishment for them. So despite the fact that they claimed to be Muslimin and said La ilaha illallah, and they were praying, and they were from the students of the Sahaba even, despite this, Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, not only did he kill them, but he killed them in a way that even other Sahaba made inkar, or they rebuked him for doing so. And then he continues, the author, he says, and these ignorant people agree that a person who denies the Day of Judgment becomes a disbeliever and should be executed, even if he says La ilaha illallah. As does the one who denies any of the pillars of Islam, he also becomes a disbeliever and should be executed even if he testifies. So he's saying here, even ignorant people would agree that if someone says La ilaha illallah but they say there's no Yawm al-Qiyamah, that this person wouldn't be Muslim. And likewise, if someone said La ilaha illallah but they said there's no salat and no zakat and no hajj and no fasting, this person wouldn't be a Muslim. So he says, or he continues and says, so how is it possible that the testimony, so saying La ilaha illallah, is of no benefit to the one who denies something like this, but if the one who denies Tawheed itself wouldn't, or that it would benefit him? So how can we say that someone who rejects something from the pillars of Islam wouldn't be benefited by La ilaha illallah, but someone who rejects the basis of Islam which is to worship Allah alone, that somehow saying La ilaha illallah gives him a benefit. When someone who does something lesser than that isn't benefited by it. And even these people agree to these types of things. And then he continues and he says, But the enemies of Allah Ta'ala did not understand the proper meaning of these ahadith. As for the hadith of Osama, then it must be understood that the reason he killed him, or he killed the man, so Osama ibn Zayd, who was the companion of the Prophet ﷺ, the reason he killed him, the reason he killed the man who professed Islam is that he presumed that he only pretended to accept Islam in order to protect his life or his wealth. However, when a person outwardly accepts Islam, it becomes obligatory to hold back from fighting him unless some other matters appear to contradict his profession. So he's saying here that when Osama ibn Zayd killed this person who said La ilaha illallah, Osama's argument was he was only doing it because he wanted to protect himself. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the meaning of which is, did you open his heart to know that? So the point was that Osama ibn Zayd claimed to understand something that was in his heart, because we don't know what's in his heart. All we knew was on the outside he was saying La ilaha illallah. So at this point, it was upon the Sahabi to only look at the outward appearance of this person and to say he said La ilaha illallah, then we accept it based upon this. And then he says, and so Allah Ta'ala revealed because of this, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu idha darabatum fi sabilillahi fatabayyanu, or all you who believe, if you go out in the way of Allah, then verify. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this verse to say that if you're fighting in the way of Allah, verify things before you go about or you do something that you might regret. And then he says, meaning, make sure the person you are fighting is not a Muslim. This verse shows that it is obligatory to refrain from fighting a person who declares himself to be Muslim, and that verification is needed. So if after this declaration, something becomes apparent from him that contradicts his Islam, he is to be executed. So the point here is that the author is saying, if all we have from a person is that they weren't Muslim and then now they're saying La ilaha illallah, we take it as them being Muslim. But then after that, if we see them, for example, worshipping Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, or making dua to other than Allah, then we say that claim that he made is false, and we don't accept it anymore. But until we have something else to show us that it was wrong, then we accept it. So this was the correct understanding of this hadith. And then he continues and he says, proof for this is the condition verify. So meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't say in this verse to never look into the matter again, or to accept it unrestrictedly despite or regardless of what the person does. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't say, as soon as someone says La ilaha illallah, never accept anything that contradicts it from him. So if you see him worshipping other than Allah, it doesn't matter. If you see him swearing at Allah, it doesn't matter. If he rejects the Quran, it doesn't matter. He said, then verify. So if you see something, look into it further. Verify whether is this the whole story or is there something else going on. And then he says, for if he were not killed after he professes Islam, no matter what he did, then there would be no point in verifying this claim. So meaning that if, regardless of what he said, it never affected him again, then why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell us to verify? If we say that anyone who says La ilaha illallah, no matter what he does, is protected unrestrictedly and will always be Muslim, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us to verify something pointlessly. So then if we say that, we're saying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us to do something that is pointless and that doesn't make sense. And obviously no Muslim would accept that. And then he continues, he says, and likewise, all of these other hadith that were mentioned must be understood in the same light. Whoever professes Islam and claims to be following Tawheed, then it is obligatory to stop harming him, except in some matter, if some matter becomes apparent which contradicts his claim. And another proof for this is the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, who is the same person who said, أَقَتَلْتَهُ بَعْدَ أَنْ قَالَ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. He's the same person who said, did you kill him after he said La ilaha illallah? He said about the Khawarij, أَيْنَمَا لَقِيتُمُوهُمْ فَاقْتُلُوهُم, or anywhere that you find them, then kill them. So the Prophet ﷺ is the one who said, did you kill him after he said La ilaha illallah? He's also telling us in other instances that there's going to be people who say La ilaha illallah. Anywhere you find them, kill them. So do we then say that the Prophet ﷺ said things that don't make sense and they're contradictory and we can't reconcile them? Or do we say that this applies in some instances and this applies in some instances? Obviously we can't attribute to the Prophet ﷺ that what he said doesn't make sense or that it contradicts each other, because this obviously would go against our beliefs as Muslimin. And then he continues and he says, and he also said, so meaning the Prophet ﷺ, فَإِذَا أَدْرَكْتُهُمْ لَأَقْتُلَنَّهُمْ قَتْلَ عَادٍ, or that if I was to meet them, meaning these Khawarij, I would kill them in the way that Ad was killed. So the people of Ad, the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala killed them, meaning that none were left. The Prophet ﷺ had the same intention to deal with the Khawarij in that way. So then he says, the author, this verdict was given even though they were of those who worshipped Allah fervently and used to praise Allah frequently. So meaning that these people, not only were they Muslimin, but the Prophet ﷺ said in some ahadith that you'll despise your salat when you compare it to their salat, and you'll despise their ibadah when you compare it to your ibadah. And there's narrations where when people would enter the askar, or the military camps and the armies of the Khawarij, they would hear a noise that sounded like it was bees buzzing, and they would say, oh, this is from the people, they're making their tasbih. So the people were so extreme or so strict in their worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yet despite this, the Prophet ﷺ said, if I meet them, I'll kill them the same way that Ad was killed. And then he continues and he says, in fact, the companions would feel humbled in front of them due to their extreme worship, even though the Khawarij learnt from the Sahaba. Their profession of La ilaha illallah did not benefit them, and neither did their worship or their claim to be Muslims, because they openly showed through other matters their rejection of Islamic law. So he's saying here that just because someone says La ilaha illallah and worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's going to be other things, or there could be other things that would show that what they're doing is invalid or it's not accepted from them. So if someone worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they fast every other day, the fast of Dawood, and they pray in the night and so on, and then during the day you also see them fighting against Muslimin, or they go to a grave and they worship the person in that grave, or they do something else that would be a nullification of Islam, then we would say these actions are correct, except they're nullified by the other thing and it doesn't benefit them whatsoever. So just like in these examples, when the people with Ali, sure they were from the companions of the companions, or the students of the companions, and they claimed to be Muslims, but when they said Ali was Allah, everything else went out the window. It had no benefit. And when Banu Hanifa, when they fought alongside Musaylama against the Sahaba, this nullified everything else that they did, and all of these other examples. And he says, and another proof is the fact that what was mentioned concerning the fighting against the Jews and that the companions fought against Banu Hanifa, he says, furthermore, the Prophet ﷺ intended to attack Bani Mustalaq when a person informed him that they refused to pay zakat, until Allah Ta'ala revealed, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu in ja'akum fasiqun binaba'in fatabayyanu, or when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, O you who believe, if an evil person comes to you with news, then verify it. So he said, so it was discovered that the person had lied against them. So all of these evidences show that the Prophet ﷺ intended with these ahadith is the explanation that has been given. So we say that the Prophet ﷺ, someone came to him and said, this group or this tribe, Bani al-Mustalaq, has refused to give the zakat. And we talked about the zakat before. Some ulama of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah say not paying zakat takes you out of Islam in and of itself. Others say if you fight against paying it, then it would remove you from Islam. But in any case, the Prophet ﷺ, upon hearing this news, had the intention to fight them, even though they claimed Islam. And in the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this verse to show that if a matter is going to be, or action is going to be taken in this type of matter, you need to verify the situation before you act upon it. So this is what the author mentioned for this shubha or this misconception. So just to add a bit about this, first of all, the hadith of Usama ibn Zayd, it's agreed upon, it's narrated by Al-Bukhari and Muslim, which that's the first evidence that they use. And they try to use it to say that if someone says La ilaha illallah, nothing would ever remove them from Islam, and obviously we know that this is false. And we know from the Prophet ﷺ that someone who says La ilaha illallah could be fought at certain times. So this is the first thing to mention about this hadith, is to clarify what's the actual meaning of the hadith of Usama. So what it means is that it doesn't mean that whoever says La ilaha illallah can never leave Islam. What it actually means is we look on the outside. If someone's outward appearance happens to be on Islam, then we go with that until we're shown otherwise. If someone's outward appearance happens to be kufr or disbelief, we don't say, well, we don't know what's in his heart. If he's a priest and he dies upon that, we don't say, well, we don't know, maybe he was Muslim inside. No, we go on, well, all we saw from him ever was disbelief, we go on that. If someone was a Muslim and we don't know any disbelief from him, we don't say, well, we don't know what was in his heart, so we can't bury him with the Muslimin, or we can't pray on him. We only go on the outside, and this applies both ways. So this is one thing to mention about the hadith of Usama. The other thing is, if we look at the way the Prophet ﷺ dealt with the Yahud, we know that the Yahud, the majority of them used to say La ilaha illallah. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, قُلْ يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ تَعَالَوْا إِلَى كَلِمَةٍ سَوَاءٍ بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَكُمْ أَلَّا نَعْبُدَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ وَلَا نُشْرِكَ بِهِ شَيْئًا. Or that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Ali Imran, which means, say, O the people of the book, come to an equal word between us, so meaning that we won't worship other than Allah, and that neither of us or none of us will take the others as lords. So this was referring to the saying of La ilaha illallah. So this is the second thing to mention. So even the Yahud, we know that they rejected the prophethood of the Prophet ﷺ, and before him Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, and we know that they rejected the Quran and the Injil and so on, but they said La ilaha illallah. So do we then say that because they say La ilaha illallah, they're Muslimin? Or do we say, they say La ilaha illallah, but certain beliefs and actions and statements that they have and that they do contradict or nullify this testimony? Obviously it's the second. So this is just a few things to add to this, and inshallah we'll stop there for tonight. Next time we'll finish with the rest of the arguments, and then after that we'll talk about the ending of the book, which is talking about a person who leaves actions or someone who never does any good deeds and only believes with their heart. Wallahu a'lam.